So many options. I've got it. M1 Max, without a doubt. No, too easy. The Pro could be half the price of the Max, but it's still a Pro. Surely that's Pro enough, right? But what if it's not Pro? Base model, 8 cores versus 10 cores. What the hell is unified memory? If I get the 14-inch over the 16-inch, I save $200. Siri, which Mac one should I get? The Max or the Pro?
I don't think I like this game.
Useless! Which one would you pick? Really? Well, that's stupid. I don't know why I asked you. You're a dog. You don't know anything about computers. M1 Pro, M1 Max, M1 Pro, M1 Max, Pro, Max, Pro, Max, Pro, Max, Pro, Max. Okay, I have officially chosen. What do you want from me, almighty Apple? Why did you make so many different M1s? Why are you testing me? Is it the Pro or the Max? The Max or the Pro? Just tell me what you want!
What are you doing?
I'm shouting at my Apple computer because there's too many Apple computers and I want to buy an Apple computer. What does it look like?
Okay.
Step forward into the light, child. Let me show you that which you seek.
Jesus?
Jobs. Steve Jobs. Come, let me show you the way.
I see it. It's beautiful. My God! It's full of stars! I've got it! I know which Mac to pick.
It's 3 a.m.
Steve Jobs just spoke to me in my dream.
You've got serious problems.
Maybe. Or maybe I've got problems. Alright, so in a follow-up to my previous video on the new Mac M1s, the benchmarks are in. We have a lot of information on each version of the M1 Pro and M1 Max to make an informed purchasing decision. But it can still feel very hard to figure out which of Apple's new M1 MacBooks is the right purchase for you. We've got 14 inches and 16 inches, different cores, more or less memory, and a whole host of other variables which starts to get very overwhelming very quickly. I've watched every single review and benchmark of the M1s, and in this video I'm going to break down in plain English, in very easy to understand and straightforward terms, what each upgrade means for you, the consumer. Which upgrade is worth purchasing depending on the type of Mac user you are, and perhaps most importantly, where you can save money by avoiding upgrades you don't need. I'll also show you which version I'm going with and why, so stick around for that. Links to the videos with the results and benchmarks I reference are available in the description should you wish to take a deeper dive around any of these machines. So, if we take a look at this graph, we have all the M1s currently available, and we're going to go through each version, look at the cost versus the features, and exactly what you get as you upgrade. First we have the original Mac M1 13-inch, released November last year. I've listed the best model, which has 16 gig of memory and 8 core GPU and CPU, and a 500 gig hard drive. This comes in at $1,700. Now, this Mac is still available. I've done a full in-depth review of it here, and the original Mac M1 still, I think, represents the best value M1. You get the most for the least. And the good news is, for most people, I would say 90% of users, this will still do everything you want it to do. It can edit most video easily, it's incredibly responsive and fast, it's small and compact, extremely portable, and has excellent battery life. So if you're looking for the most affordable Mac, and you want the most portable Mac that can do every task your favorite YouTuber throws at it, then go with the original M1. The problems I had with it were around pushing its limitations with high resolution video and more demanding edits. That doesn't sum up most people's use case for it. Casual editors can feel extremely confident with this system. Its performance and value hasn't got any less good in the year it's been out, so save your money and get this one. Now we come to the M1 Pro 14-inch base model for $2,000. It comes with 16 gigs of memory and a 512 gig hard drive. This has the same number of CPU cores as the original 13-inch M1, 8. So you won't see much improvement there, but it does have 6 more GPU cores to bring it to 14 cores, which means you'll see an improvement in graphics performance. Although in real world use, it probably won't be a huge difference. But honestly, I think it's the hardware improvements that really justify this upgrade. So apart from graphics, what do you get from spending an extra $300? Well, you get a bigger screen, which is also a better quality screen, a liquid XDR display. You get better speakers, you get a better webcam, doubling your resolution. So if you want to look good on your Zoom calls, this will make a big difference. And most importantly, at least for me, you get back all your ports. So rather than have 2 Thunderbolt ports for the 13-inch model, one of which you needed to power the laptop itself with, the 14-inch gives you 3 Thunderbolt ports. They've revived the MagSafe power socket to power the Mac separately and added an HDMI port for your monitor, plus an SD card reader. The hard drive itself is also around 2.5 times faster than the hard drive in the original 13-inch M1. So that SSD speed increase will have an effect on your overall user experience. You also get the ability to run 2 4K or 6K monitors with the 14-inch, while the original 13-inch model was only capable of running 1 high-resolution monitor. So taking these features into account, we're looking at a lot of additions. If you have an extra $300, this is absolutely a worthwhile spend. It's excellent value for money. And once again, if you're comparing your needs to most YouTubers, some editing, some photo work, general browsing, and general bits and pieces, this base model has you more than covered. If you can afford it, it's absolutely worth the upgrade. Next we come to the M1 Pro 14-inch 10-core CPU, 14-core GPU, at $2,200. Now in terms of performance, you get 2 extra CPU cores. That's it. GPU stays the same, and so does everything else. One thing to note, from now on with each upgrade, the CPU core count stays the same. So if you run more CPU intensive tasks, then continuing to upgrade past this point won't necessarily yield you much better results. In terms of additional hardware upgrades, this version of the 14-inch provides you a fast charging power cable. This cable allows you to charge 50% of your battery in just 30 minutes, which is a great feature, but I feel like Apple could have most definitely included this power cable in their base model. So if you're someone who likes to keep their computer unplugged and charge only very occasionally, this is a worthwhile accessory. If you leave your MacBook plugged in more frequently, this is not as important. This to me represents one of the least valuable upgrade options in the new lineup. While you get 2 extra CPU cores, the original M1 CPU performance with the silicon chip and only 8 cores was already excellent. So providing this particular upgrade feels like it's not worth an extra $200. The fast charging cable will be important for some people, but compared to what you get upgrading from the 13-inch M1 to the base model 14-inch, this is not such a good investment. If you're thinking of upgrading past the base model 14-inch, then you should jump straight to the MacBook M1 Pro 10-core CPU, 16-core GPU upgrade for $2,300. You of course get that fast charging cable, but with the additional cores you are now going to see a more noticeable performance increase from the base model 14-inch. It also should be noted that this is the best spec'd version of the 14-inch M1 Pro you can buy, apart from further upgrading of memory or hard drive space. This M1 Pro is probably leaning more toward the less casual, more professional end of Apple's user base. You can be confident in editing higher end footage with this model, and you can do more demanding graphics work. It's the safe bet M1 Pro. If you owned the original MacBook M1 and found it wasn't quite good enough for your work, or if you owned the original M1 and you want to see a tangible, noticeable performance increase from that MacBook without blowing out the bank, then this would be the Mac for you. Also, all of the performance increases that Apple humble bragged about in their keynote featuring the M1 Pro are based off this machine, not the base model. So if you want to see those improvements in the real world, this is the model for you. This also represents another good value upgrade proposition jumping from that base model. If you're at this point and still looking for more power from your machine,
more power.
You're at a bit of a crossroads in terms of upgrades, as spending any more money on a 14-inch model will take you past the cost of a base model 16-inch M1 Pro. In fact, it should be noted that any model you get from this point onwards can be purchased in the 16-inch body for $200 more. So anytime you're considering which size body you want, remember that the 16-inch MacBook option will always be $200 more than the same spec 14-inch version. The internals won't change, only the body will change. The cheapest base model 16-inch Mac Pro M1 is $2,500. The 16-inch does not offer any of the lower configurations that the 14-inch version does. The base model 16-inch has the best M1 Pro specs right from its entry point. You could consider it the proest of M1 Pros, with 10 CPU cores and 16 GPU cores and 16 gigs of unified memory. So what do you get for the extra $200 when choosing this over the best 14-inch M1 Pro? Well, the most obvious difference is the screen size, 16.2 inches versus 14.2 inches. This is a big jump. You also get a slightly higher resolution display. It has also been noted that the speakers are even better than the 14-inch version, although the improvements to both the display quality and the audio might be considered not hugely noticeable. The 16-inch also has high power mode, which essentially allows the MacBook's internal fans to run for longer at higher intensity, thus allowing the silicon chip to remain cooler, which in theory would mean you could get better performance for longer. This was a very interesting issue for me, as sustained consistent performance over time was something I consider very important, and Macs have a storied history of overheating and thermal issues. Macs Tech have just released a video looking at the thermal throttling of the 14-inch versus the 16-inch M1s in great detail. What the tests show was that yes, the 14-inch is limited under sustained workloads in certain situations. When rendering high-resolution footage that taxes both the CPU and GPU, we see a significant difference in performance between the two machines, with the MacBook 16-inch finishing renders between 18% and 31% faster than the MacBook 14-inch model. There was also an 11 to 16% increase in performance in the gaming tests on the 16-inch. So this is another distinct advantage purchasing the 16-inch has if you think you'll be utilizing your Mac under these types of conditions. The trade-off being that in maintaining higher performance, your 16-inch will use more power more often. It should also be noted that the performance between the two machines in other tests has shown that there is often very little difference in more standard use cases. Videos linked in the description. What has been noticed in all comparisons is fan noise and fan activation. The 14-inch has less room to fit all the components of the M1 chips. Subsequently, it will heat up quicker and require cooling faster than the 16-inch model. This means you can expect to get fans activating sooner and running longer to keep the 14-inch cool. The additional size of the 16-inch means the fans will not be required as often. So there's definitely some impressive hardware advantages to the 16-inch. It should also be noted that the 16-inch boasts an extra 4 hours of battery life, 21 hours versus 17 on the 14-inch model. Although how accurate this is with heavy program use will vary significantly. Tests so far have shown that editing content non-stop unplugged will lead to the battery lasting closer to 4 hours. So given those differences, who should get the 16-inch base model? If you value screen real estate and rely heavily on the MacBook itself rather than a separate monitor, then the increased screen size will be very important. Adjusting timelines, editing photos, watching movies in bed, all will be a much richer experience with the larger screen, and something you'll constantly be reminded of. If you are pedantic about fan noise and really appreciate a more silent experience, the 16-inch upgrade is definitely the way to go. Conversely, both of these machines are not small, so if you're after something more portable that really feels like a laptop you can fit on your lap, and makes for a more manageable travel companion, the best 14-inch M1 Pro will give you the same performance as the 16-inch in a considerably smaller form factor, for substantial savings. If, like me, you're someone who likes to work off external monitors as often as possible, the extra size will be a lot less meaningful, but the portability may come in handy. Past the base model 16-inch, the next series of upgrades and the next tier of prices will mean one of two things. Either you are upgrading your memory or hard drive space, or you are taking the leap to the M1 Max computers. Let's talk a little bit about memory upgrades and hard drive space first. In terms of upgrading your memory, I think that it's not worth upgrading if you're going with the M1 Pro. If we consider that the original Mac M1 could do almost anything with 16 gigs of memory, and the M1 Pro offers better performance through the silicon chip itself and its speedier hard drive, it's likely that if you're buying an M1 Pro, whatever you will need it for, the 16 gig option will keep up. This has been verified by MaxTech's video testing of the two different memory options side by side and seeing just how far you have to push these machines to max out that memory. Unified memory does not work the same way traditional RAM does. It is more efficient, and that's part of the benefit of these silicon ARM-based chips. Memory stretches further, so you need less of it to do more. You can spend $2,700 to get the best M1 Pro 14-inch with 32 gigs of memory, or you can spend $2,900 to get the base model M1 Max, which automatically comes with 32 gigs of memory. I believe that you may as well also get the benefits which the M1 Max has when utilizing this much memory. It's likely you'll need the additional GPU cores and the encoding benefits if your work is requiring more than 16 gigs of memory that comes standard with the M1 Pros. Basically, I think a memory upgrade to an M1 Pro is going to give you a lot less performance improvement than an upgrade to the M1 Max, which has an automatic memory upgrade. So I think it's worth spending an extra $200 to get both. Looking at the potential for upgrading your hard drive going from 512 gigs to 1 terabyte will cost you $200. But upgrading to 2 terabytes is $600, 4 terabytes is $1,200, and 8 terabytes is an eye-watering $2,400 extra. Essentially, it would be like buying a whole extra M1 Pro, but you're just paying for hard drive space. If you paid for that SSD storage separately, you'd be paying $1,200 less, if not more. Apple's hard drive is a premium SSD, which is incredibly fast, so there might be many of you considering getting larger hard drives to accommodate all your files and footage. But I don't think you'll truly get the benefit of the speeds of the SSD for most of your content. Buying an external SSD will cost you, in most cases, half or less than half of Apple's internal storage, while these SSD speeds will be dramatically slower than Apple's hard drive. As someone who works with chunky 6K footage regularly, as long as these slower SSDs are connected through a Thunderbolt port, you aren't going to see any type of bottleneck with them. A slow SSD is still fast. Therefore, storing all of your content on the most expensive SSD just to have everything on your laptop is going to be much more cost prohibitive than it is going to be beneficial to your workflow. While upgrading to the 1TB option for $200 is reasonable, I don't recommend buying any further internal storage. Save your money and buy some external SSD drives to supplement your Mac storage, and then use the spare money you've saved to upgrade your M1 Pro. You'll see a much bigger difference in speed having extra GPU cores and encoders than you will having an overpriced SSD drive. With those considerations out of the way, we move on to the M1 Max models. I'll be talking about the 14-inch versions, but if you're looking at the 16-inch version with these same specs, just add $200 to each total here. So what do you get when spending $600 more to upgrade to the base model M1 Max from the best M1 Pro? Well, as previously mentioned, you automatically get 32 gigs of memory instead of 16, and your GPU cores jump from 16 to 24. To put that into perspective, the original M1 13-inch had only 8 GPU cores, and you're getting an additional 8 GPU cores just with this upgrade. You are also increasing your memory bandwidth, which means the Macs will theoretically make better use of that extra memory as well. But separate to the memory and GPU increase, you get a dedicated media encoder and twin decoders, plus 2 ProRes accelerators. What that really means is your export and render times for any type of video are going to be a lot quicker with the M1 Max. And if you deal with ProRes video content specifically, the Max will likely handle it better than any other laptop on the market. So talking about value for money, the performance increase and features you receive for this particular $600 upgrade definitely falls into the very good value category. When we get to the M1 Maxes and consider who they are for, I really think we're now ruling out a significant portion of Mac users. And that could well mean you. This is for a very specific subset of people who work with very high-end content and are demanding a great deal of their machines. This is the M1 buyers who are expecting high-level desktop computer performance from their laptop. Realistically, some variation of the M1 Pro is really going to cover most users' needs with performance to spare. So I would really consider the M1 Max most suitable under the following circumstances. Are you an editor who deals with very high-resolution RAW footage? Are you someone who films in ProRes or ProRes RAW? Do you apply heavy color grades, denoising, and other effects to your work in post? Do you work in long-form narrative projects? Are you someone that does very heavy After Effects work? Do you extensively use Fusion or Blender? Do you process and edit hundreds of RAW photos in Lightroom or something similar? Do you put a very high premium on fast export times when creating your videos? If you've answered yes to one of these questions, or you can see yourself fitting in to this category in the future, then the M1 Max is the model for you. In which case, our final considerations are whether you get the 24 or 32 core version of the Max, and whether or not you choose to upgrade to 64 gigs of memory. The 24 core Max is probably the dark horse of all these new models because it has been the least covered in reviews. But in Luke Miani's testing and benchmarking reported on Apple Rumors, the 24 core Max performs as you would expect, sitting in the middle between the best M1 Pro and the top 32 core M1 Max. So for those that feel like they need the M1 Max power but can't afford to go all out, this is a good middle ground. My iMac is a system I rely on for very high-end editing work with 6K RAW footage, and if these benchmarks translate to an edit machine as good or better than my iMac, I imagine most high-end users would be very satisfied with this 24 core option. Moving to the 32 core version, the only difference between this and the base model Max is its number of GPU cores. You're not getting the same jump in performance and extra features that you get when going from the M1 Pro to the base model Macs. But this is the top spec Macs. When Apple refers to their own Max performance benchmarks, they are referring to this version. So if you want those types of gains over the original M1, this would be the option for you. If you're thinking about future-proofing your purchase as a high-end user, you also want this model. If you just want the best current model on the market, this is it. The final question is whether you go for 64 gigs of memory and why you need it. Just like I have dedicated VRAM in my 5700 XT graphics card on my iMac to assist in GPU processors, the unified memory can be used like VRAM in the M1. VRAM helps your computer with things like rendering, playback, and GPU intensive activities such as video stabilization and color grading. So in theory, the more you have, the better as a high-end user. But looking at real-world performance for the 16 gig with the M1 Pro models, actually fully taxing this memory requires a lot of stressing. I could only find two examples by Tyler Edwards and Roman the Explorer, who both managed to push the memory use beyond 32 gigs. But both of these were in extreme testing environments, which under conventional use would probably not occur. Links to those videos in the description. What 64 gig does give you is the peace of mind that you have the very best performing M1 computer, but it costs an extra $400, which brings the best version of the M1 Max 14-inch to $3,500 or $3,700 for the 16-inch. Either way, that's a lot of money for peace of mind. I think this upgrade is only necessary if you fall into the higher end of the high-end user category. And if that's you, then perhaps money is less of a concern for you. Steven Soderbergh, I appreciate you stopping by. So to recap, if it's the best bang for your buck you're after, the original 13-inch Mac M1 is still the best value M1. It can do a lot and is a great all-round laptop if you can accept its shortcomings, particularly around its ports. Upgrading to the 14-inch base model M1 Pro gives you one of the best value upgrades considering the advancements in body design and performance, but it doesn't have fast charge. The 14-core GPU upgrade is a pretty mediocre upgrade, and you should jump past this version straight to the 16-core GPU M1 Pro in either 14-inch or 16-inch configurations. This is probably the most affordable all-rounder option for someone looking to buy a new M1 and will suit the largest majority of people. For people that already own the original M1, this also represents a good jump in overall performance. Going with a 16-inch model is very compelling for those who need a bigger screen and would like a quieter laptop experience with less reliance on its fans. However, you're not getting any notable performance improvements by getting the 16-inch model, and it is a much bulkier, less portable laptop than the 14-inch. Upgrading memory for the M1 Pro is expensive and may be worth skipping in favor of getting that upgrade with the M1 Max. Likewise, buying more hard drive space is disproportionately expensive when compared to buying external storage to go with your M1. The M1 Max is definitely something that only high-end users will really benefit from and should probably only be bought by people who really tax their computers with demanding GPU-intensive content. When upgrading to an M1 Max, the 24-core base model represents the most significant additional features over the M1 Pro for the money. The 32-core model is going to give you the very best overall M1 experience, but damn, you're really paying for that privilege. Damn! And finally, only high-end users will really need that additional 64 gig memory upgrade. Which brings me to my own M1 purchase. What did I decide on? Well, I am probably a high-end user. I was disappointed by the limitations of the original M1, so much so, I had to go out and buy an iMac to tide me over until now. But if you know my channel, you know I am deeply entrenched in creating videos using 4K and 6K raw footage. I do edit long-form narrative content. I do apply grades and denoise my footage, and so I need something that's going to accommodate that. But I'm also not made of money. And as great as these M1s are, they're really expensive. As with the original M1, I like to run external monitors with my laptop, so I don't really need the 16-inch screen. I also have become accustomed to the small compact nature of the original 13-inch M1, and so I wanted to be closer to that form factor when I need to travel or bring my laptop to set. While I was very tempted to purchase the 24-core M1 Max to save even more money, I ultimately decided to invest in the 32-core version. I am always pushing my computer when editing, so having extra GPU performance is something that I'm often going to benefit from. I did not upgrade to the 64 gig of memory, as I think for most of my work, 32 gig will be enough, and upgrading memory is very expensive. I also reluctantly invested in the 1TB hard drive because my current hard drive content tends to sit just under 500 gigs. So going with less memory and the 14-inch version, I managed to get the best M1 Max model while saving $600 in the process. And yes, as mentioned in my previous video, I do have an ulterior motive. If my M1 Max can perform as well as or better than my current iMac, then I can sell that to comfortably cover the cost of my M1 Max. You can expect a follow-up review of the Apple M1 Max after I get to spend some time with it, but due to high demand, mine is not scheduled to arrive for some time. Wait, what was that shipping date? Well, there you have it, a breakdown of each M1 model and hopefully some solid information to help you decide which version is right for you and where you can save some money. You can find links to all the benchmarks I've referenced in the description. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like and subscribing. I make feature films, web series and shorts, and I'm here to give tips and advice to indie filmmakers about how to make those things. If you'd like to see some of my work, you can check out my latest feature film, Older, available now on Amazon and Tubi TV for free, links in the description. As always, I am the Savage Filmmaker, and I'll see you when I see you.